Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Maximum Apocalypse, and I wore my least manly shirt for a game with that title. Sorry, let's plow ahead. From Rock Manor Games. I didn't plan that. It is a fully cooperative game for 1 to 6 players. You can play it solo. In this game, it's a post-apocalyptic game, as the name implies. But in this case, there's no staving that off. It's already happened. The apocalypse has happened, and you and the other players are survivors who band together, or you're just the lone wanderer, like the Fallout games, who are just trying to survive. You're just trying to eke out a life somehow after the apocalypse has already happened. Now, how you do that is by moving through different location tiles, cards, and trying to meet different objectives, which sometimes is just getting enough supplies to get in the van and go to your next location and try to survive. But what's interesting is that you have different, aside from these different mission goals, there's also different scenarios based on the type of creatures you're going to fight. It might be mutants and raiders, or it might be aliens, or it might be, of course, zombies. You have that decision to make of which one you want to use, or all of them together for the Maximum Apocalypse mode. But let me go ahead and show you a brief look at how the game is actually played with a prototype copy of the game. So do note that what you see here may change in the final version. Just bear that in mind. But then we're going to come back and we will discuss it further. Maximum Apocalypse is a cooperative game for 1 to 6 players, in which the players are trying to survive after civilization has fallen. There are several different missions you can choose from, each with different goals, different map tiles, and different monsters and bosses to deal with. For example, depicted here is a zombie mission, but there are also mutants and aliens. You'll take all the monsters of one type, each of which have their own health, damage, and special abilities, and shuffle them together. You'll also randomly choose an applicable boss monster and put it face down next to the rest of the deck. You'll face this at a certain point as indicated by the mission. The survivors in this mission start in a shopping mall that they hold up in and must get to a van that they see in the distance. You also need to find a certain amount of fuel in most missions, in this case 4. The map tiles are randomized and laid out face down, but you will use very specific locations according to the mission specs. Each map card has several features: an indicator telling you what color deck to scavenge from, the number that has to be rolled to spawn monsters, and an effect that occurs under certain triggers. More on these later. Lastly, for the mission, you'll need to set up the 3 different scavenge decks: blue, green, and red. The mission specs will tell you which cards go in which deck. Red locations are more likely to contain fuel or medical supplies, green locations are more likely to contain food, and blue locations are more likely to contain ammunition or new gear. There are ambush cards that bring out monsters as well. Every player gets a survivor to play as. Take their card, which depicts their starting health, stealth level, range, and sometimes starting ammunition. Each one also has a unique special ability. Also, put a small 6-sided die on the card set to 1. This indicates starting hunger. A pawn also gets placed on the starting space along with the other survivors' pawns. You also get a deck of cards unique to your survivor, from which you'll draw 4 at the beginning of the game. These are helpful cards that you can play. Some of them are instants that are simply played, triggered, and then get discarded. Others are gear that take up inventory slots, of which you only have 4 at the beginning. Like weapons, which may also have starting ammunition, range, and special abilities of their own. Finally, every player gets a monster from the deck in front of them that they will have to deal with right from the get-go. Choose someone to go first. Every player's turn follows a particular sequence. First, you spawn more monsters. Roll the 2 larger dice and see if any face-up locations match the total number rolled. You'll place a monster cube on that card or cards. If one or more players happens to be where a monster spawns, each player must immediately draw a monster and the cube gets removed. 7s are always safe to roll because no location has that number. Next, you draw a card from your survivor deck. There is no hand limit. Then, take actions. You have 4 actions that you can take and several options for what to do with them. You can move 1 space for every action. Moving to a new space requires flipping a card over and triggering its effect. If there are monster tokens on an explored space already, you must pass a stealth test. Roll the 2 dice, and if the number is less than your stealth score, -1 for each monster token, you're fine. If it's higher, you'll remove each token and draw a monster for each one that you removed. You can also use actions to manipulate your cards. You can draw 1 card for every action spent, or play 1 card from your hand for every action spent. You can also perform a special action from one of your cards by spending actions. You can also scavenge, which is drawing a card from a scavenge deck that your location allows for. There are also several free actions you can do without spending actions, like discarding 2 cards to draw another one from your deck, trading cards with another player in your space, or playing cards to an objective, like putting fuel in the van, for example. After actions, increase your hunger by moving the die up to the next number. If it hits 6, you are starving. Flip the character card over. You lose your special ability, and the die gets placed at the top of the starvation track, and will now keep moving down it every time that you check for hunger. At each interval, you take the indicated damage. Even if you don't die from this irreducible damage somehow, you will eventually just die from utter starvation. As soon as you eat something and reduce your hunger below 6, you flip back over. The last thing that happens on your turn is that every monster in front of you attacks and deals their damage to you. You will have to have killed them first using your cards earlier in the round in order to avoid this. The game continues this way until either the objective has been met or you meet one of the fail conditions, which is, if you place a monster token and there are none left, you lose, or if all players die, you lose. Well, of course, I have played a lot of post-apocalyptic games at this point. It's one of those evergreen themes for anything nerdy, whether it's board games or video games. But I think in the case of board games, and in this game in particular, it's interesting because it sort of took a wider, more epic theme and put it down into very simple components. And that's not a bad thing. I don't mean that as a bad thing at all, because in this case, rather than an incredibly arduous setup in tons of very clunky rules and like little nitpicky things, it's very simple and easy to get this game going and to teach it as well. You get your survivor, you get your deck of cards, which is all very intuitive in how it works and how your character works and your special abilities and the special cards that you have that are different than everyone else. So right off the bat, you feel very different and unique from your other survivors. You get the location deck with the scenario that you choose. You choose how the map cards are determined, but you can set them up the way that you want for with some leeway, and you just lay them out there. You have this game up and running in less than 10 minutes. I mean, sometimes substantially less than 10 minutes. And actually teaching it to other people, also that low of a time frame. But at the same time, you still have that epic feel of like we're trying to survive. We get gear, we get shotguns, we get we get medicine. We might we have to fight a boss, just like Resident Evil big nasty bosses. All these different things. You scavenge, you forage, you get all of this stuff in a fraction of the time of a more grandiose, bloated game. And I think that's really saying something. And when you add in the fact that you can cater the theme to what you want, it's always the apocalypse, but it's kind of like those Fantasy Flight role-playing games where it's a different type of apocalypse for each one. Or you can mix and match and put multiples together of different types of monsters and threats. And you add high-quality artwork, and the final version will have high-quality pieces as well. And there's just a lot here for people who are into this type of theme and into cooperative games to latch onto. And if that's you, if you like the post-apocalypse, if you like different types of it, if you like cooperative games especially, or solo games, because this is a lot of times people are put off from playing certain solo games because just setting it up is so arduous that you might as well just have people around too to help you. But in this case, it's very easy for someone to do it solo too. So if you're falling into any of those categories, then definitely check out Maximum Apocalypse from Brock Manor Games. It's on Kickstarter right now. Go check it out. You don't have to take my word for any of this. You can find out more information and hopefully consider backing the project. Thank you so much for watching and for supporting our sponsors. Take care. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.